it's me, Ginger, and I am making a very short video today because it's the launch of Mark Dawson's Ads for Authors class, which is an online course. It only opens twice a year, so it's kind of a big deal. Mark Dawson is universally, I think, acknowledged as one of the leaders in providing course materials to help self-published authors become successful. And so, as somebody who's taken his classes, I always think it's a good idea to like weigh in with my thoughts about them. And it's interesting because also my writing friends and my self-published author friends, the question they'll most commonly ask me this time of year is, hey, Ginger, we know you took Mark Dawson's course, is it worth it? And it's funny because I took the course originally in 2015, so 5 years ago, and you buy lifetime access to the course. So I've gone in year after year and seen the updates because they're constantly updating the materials. And so I've sort of had a 5-year relationship with Mark Dawson's course materials, so I've got a pretty good handle on what it is they offer and the value that you can get out of them. And that means my opinion as to how valuable the course is has evolved over time. So the first year that I did it, if somebody asked me, I'd say, oh yeah, it's definitely nice to have. You learn a lot. I think last year I said it's not so much a nice to have, it's a need to have. And this year my opinion has sort of evolved once again. And it's evolved to the point where if somebody comes up to me and says, hey, Ginger, is Mark Dawson's Ads for Authors course worth the money? I'll say, for the vast majority of people who buy Mark Dawson's course, they will never see their money back. They will not get a return on their investment. And that's because Mark Dawson's course materials miss 3 vital ingredients. I remember the first year I made a video about whether his course is worth it or not. I said, I sometimes feel like it's missing the special sauce. And Mark very kindly tweeted me and said, nope, no special sauce is missed out, I'm giving you everything. And it took me a while until I figured out what it was. 3 vital ingredients that make the difference between Mark Dawson's course being worth the value or not worth the value. And the thing you've got to realize is that these 3 ingredients, the special sauce, are not things that Mark Dawson is responsible for supplying. And I think that's really important to know. I used to think that he was missing out certain things with the course, but the longer I've done it and the more I've looked into it, it's like, no, he gives you everything you need, except there are 3 ingredients that make the difference between whether or not you will get your money back about it. So I'm going to talk about these 3 ingredients, but before I do that, I think I probably should take a step back and answer a very basic question, like, okay, who is Mark Dawson? What is this advertising for authors thing about? Okay, Mark Dawson is a prodigiously successful British writer. He's self-published, I think he makes like 7 figures every single year, very easily. He's sold millions of copies of his John Milton series. He's got the Beatrix Rose series, the Isabella Rose series. I read The Cleaner, which is the first book in his series, last year, and yeah, it's a terrific read, really good. So Mark Dawson, he deserves all the success he has. However, in addition to being a prodigiously successful self-published author, he also created Self-Publishing 101 and Ads for Authors, which is another class, which are course materials you can purchase as an author to help you follow in his footsteps and become successful yourself. And I would say Mark Dawson is possibly known just as much or perhaps more for his Ads for Authors and his Self-Publishing 101 courses than he is for his books himself. That is an interesting dichotomy. Mark Dawson's 2 sort of signature courses, Self-Publishing 101, and I've taken that one, and Ads for Authors, and I've taken that one. Ads for Authors is the one that's open today, and that basically teaches you how to use Facebook advertising and Instagram advertising and advertising on Amazon to sell more copies of your books. And it costs $849, which is not an insubstantial amount. What you get for that is access to hours and hours of course materials, and constantly updated to the latest ones. You get lifetime access to them as well. So if things change with Amazon, the next time they run the course, Mark and his team, James Blatch and a few others, will update those course materials so they're still relevant and still useful. And in addition to that, you also get tons of other bonus content and things. So you get a lot for your money. But will it make you a successful author? And that's the thing, because what you're really spending $849 on is the promise of following in Mark's footsteps. And I know when I first bought the course, I was like, hey, I'm a writer, all I need to do is figure out this advertising thing and I can be living on Easy Street. And it's not that simple. And that's where it has these three missing ingredients that are so important. But anyway, that's what Mark Dawson's course are. Okay, why am I qualified to talk about it? Well, as I said, I took Mark Dawson's course, and see, I took it in 2015. I have been self-publishing since 2013. In 2013, my first year of self-publishing, I've got some notes here, I made $13,867.17. 2015, I took Mark Dawson's course and I implemented a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it. And in 2018, 2019, over the same period as my first year of self-publishing, I made $97,792. $97,792.57. So, very, very roughly, maths isn't my strong point, I made 10 times as much money as I did in my first year of self-publishing, and yeah, hands down, Mark Dawson's course is the reason that happened. And the thing that really gets me is that it's just really the tip of the iceberg. I mean, my best month of book sales after implementing everything Mark Dawson had brought in, I made, $14,573.49. So in 1 month, I made more than I made in my first year of self-publishing. So for me, Mark Dawson's course was hands down worth the money. And to be honest, I haven't got my full money's worth out of it, because I've read The Cleaner by Mark Dawson, and it's a very well written book, and it's a good book. I write romance, and I write in a slightly different style for him, so I shouldn't be looking at Mark Dawson as the person who I want to reach his level. I should look at Mark Dawson and be like, well, that's great, but I am in a much faster flowing genre, so I should be beyond that. Why aren't I? Well, all comes down to these three missing ingredients. So let me talk about that. Yeah, Mark Dawson's course worked very, very well for me. I think 64,133 copies of my books I've sold. Thanks to that. I've had nearly 30 million page reads. I mean, it blows my mind. All my life I wanted to be a writer, and you know, I'm not anywhere near as successful as I would like to be, but 63,000 people have spent their own money buying my books. Just boggles my mind. I'm very, very proud and excited, and I owe it all to Mark Dawson's course. But will it work for you? That is the question. So here we go. I'm just checking my notes. Yeah. When I first made a video recommending Mark Dawson's course, I said that I kind of felt like there was a secret sauce missing. And Mark said, there's no secret sauce, we give you everything, but there is a secret sauce. And just like McDonald's secret sauce, it consists of 3 ingredients. These are ingredients that Mark Dawson is not responsible for providing you with, but if you do not have these 3 ingredients, you are going to waste your money buying his course. The first ingredient is time. So Mark Dawson's course has tons of materials that you get access to when you buy it. But the biggest thing that I hear from all my consult clients when I speak to them and they say, oh yes, I bought Mark Dawson's course, is that they don't spend the time to actually go through the course materials. And I find that really interesting, because it's like the money is less valuable to them than the time. And it's, what is it, Tim Ferriss said that attention is a new currency. So yeah, absolutely. People buy Mark Dawson's course materials and then they're like, oh, I'll watch them, or they watch the first hour and then they say, I'll go and watch the next one, or they do something else while they're watching it, or they don't really pay attention, and basically they buy the materials but they never download the materials into their head. They never listen to them, they never understand them, they never do the hard work of actually listening and studying the courses. And if you don't do that, they're not going to work for you. It's a joke about buying books and reading books are 2 entirely separate pursuits, and it's the same thing here. You can buy the course materials, but unless you do the course materials, you are not going to get anything out of them. And by far and away, the biggest thing I see from authors who have invested in Mark Dawson's course but haven't actually been successful with it is because they haven't done the bloody course. So, first ingredient, time. If you invest in Mark Dawson's course, you need to sit down and you need to pay attention and you need to go through every single hour of the course materials and understand it and digest it. So that means you don't have a Netflix on in the background, you're not listening to music, you're not speaking to your kids or anything, you pay attention to it. I found very recently, Mark Dawson created an app which means you can access the course materials super seamlessly through your phone. And so I find one of the best times of day for me to study his materials is when I'm in the kitchen. I'll plug my phone into my Bluetooth and I have it going on in the background, and I'll tidy up and do all this mindless stuff, so I'm being productive. But at the same time, I'm listening to his materials and I'm focused 100% on his course materials. And I found that really, really useful for sort of getting that information into my head. Okay. Second thing, money. So you spent $849 on Mark's course. That is fantastic. But now you've got to spend some money on advertising. And I know I bought Mark Dawson's course originally because I was like, well, this is great. If I understand advertising, I can throw money in and get money back, and then my writing will become a self-fulfilling, a self-feeding machine that will give me financial independence. And it didn't quite work out that way. And for a lot of other people who invest in Mark Dawson's course, it doesn't quite work out that way. And the reason is that you've actually got to invest not just the time doing the courses, but also the money in experimenting with advertising. And Mark does a fantastic job at giving you all of the tools and equipment and understanding you need. But the thing is, every single book is different. Every single genre is different. Mark Dawson is hugely successful in the spy and espionage genre, but the way you advertise that is different to how you would advertise my books in the romance genre, or the science fiction books, or non-fiction books, or something like that. Mark gives you all those core things, but you need to actually spend time investing money and experimenting with all of the advertising techniques that he teaches you, so you can find out which ones work for you. I overcame this because I have a background in advertising, and I remember once, years and years ago, this was back in the early noughties or something, I spoke to one of my biggest clients when I was selling radio sales, and they were a big double glazing firm, and the guy in charge of that was just like, you know what, even with the dot-com boom and Google AdWords and stuff like that, at the end of the day, advertising is throwing a bunch of shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I recommend when you take Mark Dawson's classes, you think of your initial advertising budget like that. So for me, I do some side hustles, I'll do some cover design, I'll do some consult calls and stuff, and that money I'll then spend on advertising, not expecting to ever get it back. That's why big companies have advertising budgets, because that's money they spend on advertising and they don't expect to get it back. Ideally, you will start to figure things out and you will start to make your adverts profitable and you will start getting your money back. But that might not happen for a year, it might not happen for 2 years. Eventually you can get to the stage that you jump into it buy the course wanting to get to, which is where your book sales pay for your advertising and for you to have gin and tonics on the lawn every night. But it takes that initial push of money that you are not going to see to get that. So that's an important one to think of. Third ingredient, most important ingredient, and this is the one that I think the majority of people who fail with Mark Dawson's course are missing, and that is you have to have a good book. And it seems obvious, but it's not. We as writers are egotistical animals, and we often think that the world is obligated to read our books. And I know I definitely felt like that when I first started writing. I was like, write my book, put it out, and I'm like, yes, I am a published author and they shall read my book. I was like, oh, I've got my book here. First ever book I ever published, Adventure Ready. It's funny, I've been reading this to my kids actually, and it's not half bad, but you know what? People didn't necessarily want to read this book. Why? Because it's about a ginger British kid in Paris, and it's like, largely this is me just writing my Paris autobiography, and I don't think anybody's interested in reading that except for me or my kids. And so I could spend $1 million advertising this book, but it wouldn't necessarily mean that anyone would buy it. And that is the third ingredient that is vital to getting your money's worth out of Mark Dawson's course. You need to have a book that people want to buy. And that is a much deeper question about how you do that than I would like to go into with this this video. But what I will say is I only hit my stride and found my success as a self-published author when I wrote the second book in my romance series, which just exploded. Because it's like that movie The Producers. Where did I go right? It's like I somehow stumbled across the formula, and from then on I have been writing to that formula, to what it is that readers want, and I've found that I've become successful. When I've strayed from that formula, I've become less successful. It's very, very important to understand what it is that readers want, to understand what it is that people want to pay money for, because your advertising doesn't sell your book. Your advertising drives traffic to your product page on Amazon, and your product page sells your book. So your book has to have kick-ass cover. It has to have a really tight blurb. When you click on that look inside, the first page that readers read has to be tight as a button. You need to have reviews that are good. You need to have enough reviews so people are like, oh, this guy's legit. Your editing needs to be tight as a traditionally published book. Nobody is obligated to buy your book. Nobody gives a shit unless your book is actually worth buying. So you need to spend time researching. Before you even put pen to paper, you need to be like, what kind of book am I going to write? Am I going to write an espionage book? Am I going to write a romance book? Am I going to write a horror book? Then you have to be like, okay, what is it that romance readers want? And you have to understand the subgenre of that. You have to understand how they tell their stories and things. And this is what most self-published authors stumble over, because they're like, well, I want to write my book my way. The thing I hear most often from all of the self-published authors I work with is they go like, well, this kind of spans multiple genres. And it's like, that's great. And actually, your book is great. But readers don't find books by spanning multiple genres. Readers like particular genres of books. And so you have to think from the perspective of a reader rather than the perspective of a writer. And this is very, very difficult for a lot of authors to get their heads around. Even just basic stuff like romance. I write romance in the first person perspective with alternating viewpoints because that is the style of how successful contemporary romance books are written. And I adopted that because that's what sold. And you can see the sales figures for my books and see that it clearly worked. And there are a lot of authors who are like, well, I want to write third person. Or I don't like first person. It's like, that's fine. But that's your particular personal opinion. The people who you want to sell your books to have a different opinion, and you have to respect that. And the way you do that as a writer is you have to divorce storytelling from writing. Storytelling is your story, and your story is sacred. Your characters, the events they go through. But the way you tell that story, you have to cater to the people you're trying to sell a book to. So you can have a love story, and you can tell it in third person and it won't resonate with people, or you can tell it in first person and it will resonate with people. You can focus on multiple characters, or you can focus on just one. You can set it in present tense, you can set it in past tense. What you have, the process of writing is a craft, and it's like you build a table and you have 4 legs and a flat surface. When you write a romance book, you have to have certain beats and certain things that people expect, otherwise it doesn't do its job. So separate storytelling and writing. And the secret sauce is you write what it is that people want to buy. Your story is sacred. You don't have to compromise on your story or characters or anything like that. You do have to compromise on how you write the book so people want to buy it. And that is the biggest differentiator. That's the key ingredient to this special sauce is you have to have a book that people want to buy. If you have a book that people want to buy, and then you implement everything that you learn from Mark Dawson's classes, you will be successful. And it's not a question of you might be successful. If you have a book that people want to buy, and you'll know that because it will sell more copies organically than your other books. If you have a book that people want to buy, and you implement everything that Mark Dawson teaches you, you will be a successful self-published author. If you continue to write, and if you write book series, and you continue going on like that, it will be a snowball momentum effect that will change your life, and you can be that self-published successful author that you want to be. But you need to have a book that is worth people's attention and people want to buy, and then the next book has to be the same, and the next book has to be the same. If you can do those 3 things, if you can invest the time and the advertising budget, and you can have a book that people want to buy, you will be successful. And Mark Dawson's course is not just worth the money, but you'll make 10, 20, 30, 100 times that money back. But if you do not do the course materials, and if you do not invest your advertising budget in a strategic way, knowing you might not immediately get it back, and if you don't have a book that people want to buy, you will fail. You will spend all that money on Mark Dawson's course, and you won't get a return on your investment, and it won't be Mark Dawson's fault. It'll be your fault. And I know that because I've seen many authors stumble across that. I'm here 5 years down the road and I'm not where I want to be, and it's not because of Mark Dawson's courses not teaching me what it is. It's me having to get my head around those 3 ingredients. So, long story short, it has been, I've already gone past long story short, Mark Dawson's course, Advertising for Authors, is worth the money if you are willing to invest those 3 key ingredients to make it work for you. If it's not, save your money, don't do it. Hopefully this video has given you some perspective on that, and hopefully you're like, yeah, heck, I want to be a successful self-published author, and I'm going to do Mark Dawson's courses, and I'm going to invest the time and the money, and I'm going to have a book that people want to buy, and I'm going to be super successful. And if that is the commitment that you make, I support you 100%. And hopefully you found this video useful and interesting. If you did, I have a link down below for Mark Dawson's Advertising for Authors class, and I would love it if you could click on that link and buy the course through that sort of affiliate link. I get a little bit of money from it, so that's great for me. Doesn't cost you anything extra, but for me it makes it worth like spending the time to make these videos, which I hope are going to be useful to you. So yeah, let me know in the comments below as well whether this video has been useful and whether you think Mark Dawson's course is something that you will invest in, and I would love to know how you do with it. Before I go, I will shove another link in there. One of the other courses that Mark Dawson offers is by a woman called Susie Quinn, I think, who she wrote a course called How to Write a Bestseller. And that 3rd ingredient I told you about, having a book that people want to buy, I think that course in particular is really useful because it kind of breaks down what it is that makes a successful book. So if you can figure out having a successful book and then you compare it with everything you learn in advertising for authors, yeah, you will be successful. So it's all on you, basically. Mark Dawson gives you everything you need. It's just a question of putting it into practice. Hopefully you found this useful. If you buy the course, please use the link below, and I will see you again soon. Cheerio.